here. Here I thought I'd be late. And what? It's just, hi! Yes! Oh, tin cup of milk, yay. Well, I got graham crackers. A snack. There you are. So, I was really worried I was going to be late. Because I was doing my hair. Look how shiny. Look how shiny it is. It's all shiny today. It's a little darker. Yes, I dyed my hair. A little rinse. It's a little wrench. Look, it was pretty good, right? Great, and it came out all poofy and shiny. So it looks, I think it's good. You like the hair? Huh? I like the hair. That's good. A little home cosmetic action. Well, hey, yes, it's Alison in the living room again still. Today, such a Monday. It is so Monday. It is Monday. It is May the 4th, which, of course, everyone totally knows because we're all such nerds that is Star Wars Day. Because May the 4th be with you. Oh, ho, 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 ho. Yeah, Star Wars Day. So dumb. I like Star Wars, but it's so silly. May the 4th be with you. Weather Observers Day. It's sunny out. There, I'm a weather observer. National Renewal Day. Yes, it's a Monday. We should be renewed. That sounds good. National Orange Juice Day. Ooh, do I have orange juice? I have orange juice, but I'm totally going for milk right now because I have graham crackers, which are way awesome. So there we go. Going with that. It is, Melanoma Monday. But there you go. Don't be very careful going out in the sun. Check your doctor. Watch your moles. Get a mole. I regularly do go to the dermatologist and go, I have an interesting mole, or what is this? And they check. I get my mole. If I have a mole or anything odd appears on my body, I go to the dermatologist and go, and they say, no, it's mole. It's okay. But you got to check because you get melanoma, you get cancer, you get skin cancer. It's very bad. And you spend too much time in the sun. Skin cancer. Okay? It's very dangerous. So you have to be careful. National Candied Orange Peel Day. Ooh, that sounds really good. Bird Day. It doesn't say National Bird Day. It's just Bird Day. Maybe it's Worldwide Bird. I have no idea. Wow. I might have to, make a hoagie for tomorrow. Tomorrow's Cinco de Mayo and Taco Tuesday at the same time. So, I have graham crackers, and they're good. They're the Trader Joe's good graham crackers. I have a cold cup of milk. I like milk. And I have hair. Looks, yeah. Nice and good. Kind of darker blonde. Very shiny. Very good body. No roots. That, yes. Oh, you're listening to me while shopping the dollar store? Hi, everyone in the dollar store. I love dollar stores. I shop the dollar store all the time. I get the best stuff at the dollar store. I love the dollar store. Hi, dollar store people. Rock out. 99 cents rules. Yes, everything in the world should be $1. The dollar. Get the wine glasses. If you're at the dollar store, get the wine glasses. Half my wine glasses are... I get wine glasses at the dollar store. They have these lovely blue ones. You can get them in colors. They're $1. And they're great because should you have a party, I just did it at my birthday in January, last party I had. We have a party. And, people, instead of doing the plastic cups, you can say, oh, look, here's a real wine glass. And if somebody drops one, because somebody will, they'll go on the patio and they'll go, whoops, and smash. People break your wine glasses. And they're like, oh, sorry, I broke a wine glass. And you're like, it's $1. So yes, I have many beautiful wine glasses, blue and green and clear, from the dollar store. They're very pretty. I have fancy wine glasses too, but I also have the dollar ones. So somebody drops it, oops, sweep up the glass and go, la la la, it's $1. So in Canada, the dollar stores are $3. Yes, because what's Canadian dollars, like 75 cents? Sorry, I love Canada. I am Canadian, but Canadian dollars always. It's like a sale. Your country is on sale. Well, let's see. So we did it. We did the Nellie chapters. We did them. We did the episode that became the episode Country Girls. in the books, and we did the episode that became Town Party, Country Party in the show. So that's the stuff in the books. We did it, and there was no Olga, there was no little Kim Richards, Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Olga, who's awesome. She wasn't in here because she was in the show. Going to church. Well, I better sit up straight. We're going to church. It's the going to church chapter. Chapter 14. This is a long. This is a thick one. Yeah. Where do we get to the long winter? All right, going to church. It was Saturday night, and Pa sat on the doorstep smoking his after-supper pipe. Laura and Mary sat close on either side of him. Ma, with Carrie in her lap, rocked gently to and fro just inside the doorway. The winds were still. The stars hung low and bright. The dark sky was deep beyond the stars, and Plum Creek talked softly to itself. They told me in town this afternoon that there will be preaching in the new church tomorrow, said Pa. Ooh, so new school's open with the Miss Beadle, new school, new store, new slates, new pencils, church, oh boy. I met the home missionary, Reverend Alden, and he wanted us to be sure to come. I told him we would. So Reverend Alden is in the books. We did not make him up. He is in the books. And I think he kind of sort of is historical. Like, there's like, Reverend Alden, sort of. Awesome. Oh, Charles, Ma exclaimed. We haven't been to church for so long. Like years. I mean, I guess they went to church in the big woods, but they didn't go to church when they were in Kansas. There was no church, and all that schlepping for months across 2 years. Laura and Mary had never seen a church. Now, wait a minute. I know they were bambinos, little babies in Little House in the Big Woods. They were pretty tiny, but they're old enough to go to church. Are you telling me there was no church near the Big Woods, Wisconsin? When did these people go to church? I think I might have gone to church more than the Eagles. Tisk, tisk, tisk. We haven't been to church so long. Laura and Mary never seen a church. Whoa, they're like, 8 and 9. But they knew from Ma's voice that going to church must be better than a party. After a while, Ma said, I'm so glad I finished my new dress. Well, she did give them Bible lessons. Okay, so they weren't like missing out completely. Okay. You will look sweet as a posy in it, Pa told her. We must start early. Oh, Pa and the flattery. We kind of wondered like what she was doing with him, since clearly farming is not his forte, because he doesn't know about like locusts and grasshoppers. But Pa is always there with the compliments. Pa's always got, which is smart. You know, you're out on the prairie and you're like rationing food and there's not enough to eat and there's wolves and stuff. You might want to be really nice to your wife. You might want to say, honey, you look gorgeous. Yes, that dress it's you. You want to keep that stuff up. Pa's smart on that one. Next morning was a hurry. Breakfast was a hurry. Work was a hurry. And Ma hurried about dressing herself and Carrie. She called up the ladder in a hurrying voice. Come on down, girls. I'll tie your ribbons. They hurried down. Then they stood and stared at Ma. She was perfectly beautiful in her new dress. It was black and white calico, a narrow stripe of white, then a wider stripe of black lines and white lines, no wider than threads. Up the front, it was buttoned with black buttons, and the skirt was pulled back and lifted up to puffs and shirrings behind. That's actually quite fancy. If you notice on the show, our dresses were not that fancy. We did not have so much with the poofs. Even Mrs. Oleson didn't have that much poofs and shirring. We did not have bustles, and we didn't have hoops. We were later. We were too late for hoops. Hoops was earlier, so we had no hoop skirts on Little House on the Prairie because we were late 1870s and not so much with the hoops. And we asked about bustles. I remember Melissa Gilbert and I, we so wanted bustles, and we would ask the wardrobe lady, do we get bustles? Do we get bustles? And she would say, bustles aren't in yet, because they would check the fashion magazines in the Sears catalog from the 1800s and look to see what was it. And they said, okay, bustles are about to come in, but they would be in the big city. If you lived in New York or London or Paris, you would have a bustle. But you're in Walnut Grove, Minnesota, so you're like behind. You're not going to get a bustle for like 2 more years. But we had lovely dresses, but we didn't really have the poofs and the shirrings and the bustles and the hoo-ha here. These got a lot of stuff out. Crocheted lace edged the little stand-up collar. Crocheted lace spread out in a bow on Ma's breast, and the gold breastpin held the collar and the bow. Now, we did have that. We had beautiful crocheted lace. I had lace on my cuffs of my dress and lace at the collar. I had so much lace. We had lace, beautiful lace. So we did have that. Ma's face was lovely. Her cheeks were flushed and her eyes were bright. She turned Laura and Mary around and quickly tied the ribbons on their braids. Then she took Carrie's hand. They all went out on the doorstep and Ma locked the door. They locked the door. It's the 1800s. They live in the middle of nowhere. They're locking the door. Just saying. Carrie looked like one of the little angel birds in the Bible. Her dress and her tiny sunbonnet were white and all trimmed with lace. Her eyes were big and solemn. Her golden curls hung by her cheeks and peeped from under the bonnet behind. Oh, baby Carrie. Yeah, baby Carrie, she's so cute. Then Laura saw her own pink ribbons on Mary's braids. She clapped her hand over her mouth before a word came out. She scrooged and looked down her own back. Mary's blue ribbons were on her braids. She scrooged again. Laura Ingalls-Wilder made up this word. She scrooged down. Who does this? It's Scrooge. They have the wrong color braids. Well, that's right, because Mary has the blonde hair and Laura has the brown hair. So normally she does the red braids, blue braids. Oh, and they switched them. What are they going to do? She and Mary looked at each other and did not say a word. Ma, in her hurry, had made a mistake. Oh, continuity! See, the show he would have gone, continuity! The script lady would have said, yeah, you're wearing the wrong ribbons, girl. Yeah. They hoped she would not notice. Laura was so tired of pink, and Mary was so tired of blue. But Mary had to wear blue because her hair was golden, and Laura had to wear pink because her hair was brown. These girls are in a bit of a rut. They are really, really control freaks. They're really like stuck in this. You have these color ribbons and I have these color ribbons and that is final. And I'm like, really? Really? Is it, you have to? You could wear any color ribbons you want, really. But, you know, so this is good for them. This is good. They need to switch color ribbons because they're just way too uptight about these things. Pa came driving the wagon from the stable. He had brushed Sam and David till they shone in the morning sunshine. They stepped proudly, tossing their heads and their manes and tails rippled. Okay, so only people my age who think it's funny that the horses are named Sam and Dave. Hold on, I'm coming. There was a clean blanket on the wagon seat and another spread on the bottom of the wagon box. Pa carefully helped Ma climb up over the wheel. He lifted Carrie to Ma's lap. Then he tossed Laura into the wagon box, and her braids went, get in the way! And then he threw Laura in the wagon, and her braids flew out. Oh dear, Ma exclaimed, I put the wrong ribbons in Laura's hair. It'll never be noticed on a trotting horse, said Pa. Ah! So Laura knew she could wear the blue ribbons. This is an old expression, I've heard this. It'll never be noticed on a trotting horse. Now, in their case, literally, because they're going to be riding a trotting horse. But they sometimes said that even during filming, when we have continuity issues, like, uh-oh, is that out of place? Is that, well, it'll never be noticed on a trotting horse. It's like, will they see it at that speed? Never be noticed. Sitting beside Mary on the clean blanket in the wagon bottom, she pulled her braids over her shoulders. So did Mary, and they smiled at each other. Laura could see the blue whenever she looked down, and Mary could see the pink. They're like really excited. This is like an exciting day for them. They need to get out more. Pa was whistling, and when Sam and David started, he began to sing. Oh, every Sunday morning, my wife is by my side, waiting for the wagon, and we'll all take a ride. I don't know that one. Charles, Ma said softly to remind him that this was Sunday. I guess he was singing like a pop song of its day. Then they all sang together. There is a happy land, far, far away, where saints in glory stand, bright, bright as day. You can only sing hymns on Sunday, according to Ma. You can't sing wagon riding songs. Plum Creek came out from the willow shadows and spread wide and flat and twinkling in the sunshine. Sam and David trotted through the sparkling shallows. Glittering drops flew up and waves splashed from the wheels. Then they were away on the endless prairie. The wagon rolled softly along the road that hardly made a mark on the green grasses. Birds sang their morning songs. Bees hummed. Great yellow bumblebees went bumbling from flower to flower, and big grasshoppers flew whirring up and away. Zzz. But no murder hornets. Murder hornets! You read about these murder hornets. I'm terrified. Okay, they mostly murder bees, but that's bad enough. There are no murder hornets on the prairie, thank heavens. Too soon they came to town. The blacksmith shop was shut and still. The doors of the stores were closed. A few dressed-up men and women with their dressed-up children walked along the edges of dusty Main Street. They were all going toward the church. The church was a new building, not far from the schoolhouse. Not far from the schoolhouse! It was a different building! They had two buildings. They had a schoolhouse and a church. As you know on the show, the one. We just had one building and went, oh, look, it's the schoolhouse and it's church, which was very common. Historically, that's a thing because in many towns they couldn't afford to be building all these different buildings. They might not have the wood or the manpower to be putting up that. And school's closed on the weekends. You got a perfectly good schoolhouse. It's got the seating. It's got the desk. You can do little Bible school presentations on the chalkboard. I mean, it's a good facility for it. And what are you going to do? It's Sunday, nothing happening. So many places using the schoolhouse and the church for the church was perfectly reasonable. But in the book, they actually had an entirely different building for their church. Harumph, harumph, harumph. Well, Pa drove toward it through the prairie grass. It was like the schoolhouse, except that on its roof was a tiny room with no walls and nothing in it. What's that? Laura asked. Don't point, Laura, said Ma. It's a belfry. A belfry! Ding, ding, ding. Pa stopped the wagon against the high porch of the church. He helped Ma out of the wagon, but Laura and Mary just stepped over the side of the wagon box. They all waited there while Pa drove into the shade of the church, unhitched Sam and David, and tied them to the wagon box. So he let them out and then went around back to the parking lot and parked the car. People were coming through the grass, climbing the steps and going into the church. There was a solemn, low rustling inside it. Well, it sounds like they got a belfry. A bell, not just like the church school where we hung a bell out front. Heavens to Betsy. At last, Pa came. He took Carrie on his arm and walked with Ma into the church. Laura and Mary walked softly close behind them. They all sat in a row on a long bench. Church was exactly like a schoolhouse, except that it had a strange, large, hollow feeling. Every little noise was loud against the new board walls. Okay, so they could have used the schoolhouse because it was exactly like a church. So, but they didn't. They had their own building. I'm jealous. We didn't have a separate building out in the show. A tall, thin man stood up behind the tall desk on the platform. His clothes were black, and his big cravat was black, and his hair and the beard that went around his face were dark. His voice was gentle and kind. All the heads bowed down. The man's voice talked to God for a long time, while Laura sat perfectly still and looked at the blue ribbons on her braids. Suddenly, right beside her, a voice said, "Come with me." Laura almost jumped out of her skin. A pretty lady stood there, smiling out of soft blue eyes. The lady said again, "Come with me, little girls. We are going to have Sunday school class." Now, obviously, our Reverend Alden was not a tall, skinny, young guy with a black beard. Our Reverend Alden was an older, portly gentleman with, hardly any hair at all and no beard and very pale. This guy's all dark, bearded, young, skinny dude. So our Reverend Alden didn't look anything like Reverend Alden in the books. And we did not have Sunday school. At church in Walnut Grove, on our show, everybody just went to school together, went to church together at the end. Y'all just went to church, and that was it. And the little tiny children got the exact same service as the grown-ups, and that was it. Whereas they were fancy. It's much fancier here in the book. They have Sunday school, a separate place for the children. Well, Ma nodded at them, so Laura and Mary slid down from the bench. They had not known there was going to be school on Sunday. They're like, "School!" The lady led them to a corner. All the girls from school were there, looking questions at one another. The lady pulled benches around to make a square pen. She sat down and took Laura and Christy beside her. When the others were settled on the square benches, the lady said her name was Mrs. Tower, and she asked their names. Then she said, "Now I'm going to tell you a story." Notice there's like no Mrs. Tower on the show. Clearly, Michael read this one. What? Laura was very pleased, but Mrs. Tower began, "It's all about a little baby born long ago in Egypt. His name was Moses." So Laura did not listen anymore. She knew all about Moses in the bulrushes. Even Carrie knew that. It's true. This lady Sunday school lesson is kind of super duper kindergarten grade 1. And most of these kids are like, we read the Bible every night at home. What do you go? Yeah, Moses. Yeah, been there. After the story, Mrs. Towers smiled more than ever and said, "Now we'll all learn a Bible verse. Won't that be nice?" Okay, are we getting that Mrs. Tower is totally creepy and condescending? Yes, we are. And Laura's like, "I know the entire Bible. Who are you?" Okay, yeah, Laura's up on her Bible. She's read the whole Bible. She does not need to be instructed about Moses. She's already there. "Yes, ma'am," they all said. She told a Bible verse to each girl in turn. They were to remember the verses and repeat them to her next Sunday. That was their Sunday school lesson. When it was Laura's turn, Mrs. Tower cuddled her and smiled, almost as warm and sweet as Ma. She said, "My very littlest girl must have a very small lesson. It will be the shortest verse in the Bible." Oh, you can imagine. Yeah, Laura Ingalls Wilder. It's like really? So, funny. Oh my God. Then Laura knew what it was, because she knows the Bible by heart. But Mrs. Towers' eyes smiled, and she said, "It's just 3 words." She said them and asked, "Now do you think you can remember that for a whole week?" Laura was surprised at Mrs. Tower. Why, she remembered long Bible verses and whole songs, but she did not want to hurt Mrs. Tower's feelings, so she said, "Yes, ma'am." "That's my little girl," Mrs. Tower said. Ick. We don't like Mrs. Tower. Mrs. Tower's annoying. But Laura was Ma's little girl. "I'll tell you again to help you remember. Just 3 words," said Mrs. Tower. "Now can you say them after me?" Laura squirmed. "Try," Mrs. Tower urged her. Laura's head bowed lower, and she whispered the verse. "That's right," Mrs. Tower said. "Now will you do your best to remember and tell me next Sunday?" Laura nodded. After that, everyone stood up. They all opened their mouths and tried to sing "Jerusalem the Golden." Not many of them knew the words or the tune. Miserable squiggles went up Laura's backbone, and the inside of her ears crinkled. She was glad when they all sat down again. Laura knows all the hymns. She knows the tune. She knows the words. She knows the Bible. And they're totally like amateur hour at this church. They don't know the hymns. They're learning like 3-word Bible verses. And Laura's going, I came all the way into town for this. Now, the shortest Bible verse, she's saying 3 words, but I thought it was 2. Because it's Jesus wept. Because that's 2 words. That's 2 words, not 3. So I don't know which. I'm going to find out what Mrs. Tower gave her, because I'm thinking 2 words is the shortest one. And why do we all know that? Because it was on the Waltons. Yes, the other show. My friends on the Waltons. Yes, the Prairie people, the Prairie actors, and the Waltons actors. We talk to each other. The Waltons people and the Prairie people are friends. In fact, tomorrow is Tuesday. I will be interviewing, you know her as Tammy Beulah. She has written a book and everything. She was John Boy's first girlfriend. She's going to be on. The Waltons, we love each other. But on the Waltons, they had an episode where a church was handing out presents to the poor children, and the Waltons kids went, and they were kind of like, well, we really shouldn't take the charity, but hey, free stuff. And it was Mary Ellen who told little tiny little itty bitty redhead Elizabeth, Jesus, what? And they started giving out, because the Waltons kids all knew them, so they were prompting the younger children for the poor families who didn't know Bible verses and going, "Psst, Jesus wept. It's only 2 words. You can do it." And so they were all going out saying, "Jesus wept," and the Plum, "Lovely, here's your toys." So yeah, the Waltons, where they cheated at a Bible verse game to help the poor families get free toys. So that's why we all know that one. Even the people who don't know their Bible know that. Oh yeah, it's not on the Waltons. But apparently we have a 3-word one. Here, I'm baffled. I don't know which one it is. All right. So Laura's kind of like, bring me to real church, because this is silly. Then the tall, thin man stood up and talked. Laura thought he would never stop talking. We've all been to that sermon. Yes. She looked through the open windows at butterflies going where they pleased. She watched the grasses blowing in the wind. She listened to the wind whining thin along the edges of the roof. She looked at the blue hair ribbons. She looked at each of her fingernails and admired how the fingers of her hands would fit together. Oh, she's really bored. She stuck her fingers out straight so they looked like the corner of a big house. She looked at the underneath of shingles overhead. Her legs ached from dangling still. At last, everyone stood up and tried again to sing. Tried again to sing. It was that bad. When that was over, there was no more. They could go home. We sang okay on the show. We sang. I don't sing that well, as you may know, but on our show, we had several people who could sing very well, and we had a pitch pipe. School pitch pipe. And so, like, the two people who could sing well and knew all the hymns would step forward, go, okay, everybody, we're doing this one. Now it's going to go, we're going to take the pitch, ring the bells of heaven. And they would teach us. And we would go, and we would learn. So even the people who couldn't sing and didn't know hymns, we were like, and that's why we sound pretty good on the show. Apparently, in the book, nobody could sing. Ha! Okay. The tall, thin man was standing by the door. He was the Reverend Alden. He shook Ma's hand and he shook Pa's hand and they talked. Then he bent down and he shook Laura's hand. His teeth smiled in his dark beard. His eyes were warm and blue. He asked, "Did you like Sunday school, Laura?" Suddenly, Laura did like it. She said, "Yes, sir." "Then you must come every Sunday," he said. "We'll expect you." And Laura knew he really would expect her. He would not forget. On the way home, Pa said, "Well, Caroline, it's pleasant to be with a crowd of people all trying to do the right thing, same as we are." "Yes, Charles," Ma said thankfully. "It will be a pleasure to look forward to all week." So, Mrs. Tower is kind of a dork, and Laura's not mad about Sunday school. They're very silly, Mrs. Tower. But Reverend Alden's cool. She likes Reverend Alden, so she's like, okay, yeah, I'll put up with this here. Pa turned on the seat and asked, "How do you girls like the first time you ever went to church?" "They can't sing," said Laura. Busted. Pa's great laugh rang out. Then he explained, "There was nobody to pitch the hymn with a tuning fork." "See, nowadays, Charles," said Ma, "people have hymn books." "Well, maybe we'll be able to afford some someday," Pa said. After that, they went to Sunday school every Sunday. 3 or 4 Sundays they went to Sunday school, and then again the Reverend Alden was there, and that was a church Sunday. The Reverend Alden lived at his real church in the East. He could not travel all the way to this church every Sunday. This was his home missionary church in the West. Oh, they're so far out that they're getting missionaries. It's not even like regular church. Now, in our case, we had Reverend Alden all the time on the show. But in this one, Reverend Alden's at his real job and coming in once a month to, like, talk to the poor country bumpkins. But you get Sunday school, and they're sort of, like, considered unchurched. And as she said, pitch it with a tuning fork. And on the show, we had a pitch, but we did. We had someone would start, before they started filming, go, "Okay, you guys ready? Did you go over the words? You know, got, like, a printout? We had hymnals, and we'd all try it once." And that's why we weren't horrible when we sang on the show. And I know all the words to Bringing in the Sheet. Bringing in the Sheet. Yeah, I do. It's terrible. I know. Always bring sheets. We sang it over and over and over again. Well, that was pretty good. There were no more long, dull, tiresome Sundays, because there was always Sunday school to go to and to talk about afterward. The best Sundays were the Sundays when the Reverend Alden was there. He always remembered Laura, and she remembered him between times. He called Laura and Mary his little country girls. He said it a lot nicer than I did, didn't he? Then one Sunday, when Pa and Ma and Mary and Laura were all sitting at the dinner table talking about that day's Sunday school, Pa said, "If I'm going to keep on going out among dressed-up folks, I must get a pair of new boots. Look." He stretched out his foot. His mended boot was cracked clear across the toes. They all looked at his red knitted sock showing through the gaping slit. The edges of leather were thin and curling back between little cracks. Pa said, "It won't hold another patch." "Oh, I wanted you to get boots, Charles," Ma said, "and you brought home that calico for my dress." Pa made up his mind. I'll get me a new pair when I go to town next Saturday. They will cost $3, but we'll make out somehow till I harvest the wheat. $3. Back then, that's a pricey pair of boots. That's a nice pair of boots. And again, credit. Starting to worry about this guy. This is a guy who should not have a credit card. He just charged the house. He charged the horses, charging the wagon, charging some boots. I know I like to go out and buy a lot of shoes on the credit card, but I try to restrain myself. After all that week, Pa was making hay. He had helped put up Mr. Nelson's hay and earned the use of Mr. Nelson's fine, quick mowing machine. He said it was wonderful weather for making hay. He had never known such a dry, sunny summer. Oh, the weather that is unusual. Like grasshoppers. Laura hated to go to school. She wanted to be out in the hayfield with Pa, watching the marvelous machine with its long knives, snicking behind the wheels, cutting through the great swaths of grass. Saturday morning, she went to the field on the wagon and helped Pa bring in the last load of hay. They looked at the wheat field, standing up taller than Laura above the mown land. Its level top was rough with wheat heads, bent with the weight of ripening wheat. They picked 3 long fat ones and took them into the house to show Ma. When that crop was harvested, Pa said, they'd be out of debt and have more money than they knew what to do with. Oh, we've all heard that one before, haven't we? He'd have a buggy, Ma would have a silk dress, and they'd all have new shoes and eat beef every Sunday. After dinner, he put on a clean shirt and took $3 out of the fiddle box. He was going to town to get his new boots. He walked, because the horses had been working all that week, and he left them at home to rest. Like union horses. The horses get a day off. The horses are like, sorry, man, we're unions. Yeah, you gotta walk. It was late that afternoon when Pa came walking home. Laura saw him on the knoll, and she and Jack ran up from the old crab's home in the creek and into the house behind him. He walked all the way there, in his boots were falling apart, so ow. Ma turned around from the stove, where she was taking the Saturday baking of bread out of the oven. Ooh, bread. Is everyone baking bread? They say everyone's baking bread now, and that's why there's no flour or yeast left in the supermarket. I was at the supermarket a few days ago, and there was no flour. It's okay. I already have some. I already had flour. Should I go on some mad baking spree? But there's no flour. So Ma's baking. She's baking once a week, every Saturday. Where are your boots, Charles? She asked. Well, Caroline, Pa said, I saw Brother Alden, and he told me he couldn't raise enough money to put a bell in the belfry. The folks in town had all given every cent they could, and he lacked just $3. So I gave him the money. Charles. Now, luckily the Reverend Alden, I think, is for real, and they do need a bell, but it sounds like Charles would believe anything. I think he would have traded the cow for the magic beans here. $3, that's a lot of money. And his feet are sticking out of his shoes, and he just handed over $3 to the Reverend Alden for a bell. Okay, I don't know. That's a little rough. It better be a really good bell. Oh, Charles, was all Ma said. Oh, Charles. Paul looked down at his cracked boot. I'll patch it, he said. I can make it hold together somehow, and we'll hear that church bell ringing clear out here. Ma turned quickly back to the stove, and Laura went quietly out and sat down on the step. Her throat hurt her. She did so want Pa to have good boots. Never mind, Caroline, she heard Pa saying. It's not long to wait till I harvest the wheat. Yeah, she turned around to the stove because she couldn't even look at him. She's like, you just gave $3 to the Reverend Alden for a bell. You have no shoes. Okay. Now in the show when we were filmed, we did not have this thing that Charles. In real life, Charles Ingalls did chip in for a bell, and there apparently is a real bell at one of the museums. And Sarah, the boots are long gone, but that bell is still ringing every Sunday. I've rung it myself. Yes. Which town is it, Sarah? Which town is the real bell in? Because the real bell that Charles bought for the church is still there. It's not Walnut Grove though, but it's still there. And whereas the she said, I don't know where it is. Oh well, the real bell. But on the show, fake bell, we didn't do that. On the show, we had people taking up a collection for the bell, and then what we finally did was Voice of Tinker Jones because they were all fighting about it. And all the kids donated their metal toys, and Tinker Jones melted them down and made a beautiful bell, and it hung in the thing and rang. But it's not still around. The real bell they did that Charles paid for is still around, but the one we had on the show isn't, because it was sort of like fiberglass and it was paper mache, basically. It was kind of a fiberglass plasticky thing, and it was hanging there. And when you're it's in Walnut Grove. The real bell's in Walnut Grove. If you go to Walnut Grove, the real bell is there in the real Walnut Grove. Pretend Walnut Grove bell, paper mache. Miss Beadle would ring it, and it would go clunk 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 clunk, because it was plastic. And then they would, in the studio, the recording studio, have a beautiful bell going ding ding, and you could not hear it. He says you can hear it at the Little House. Well, at the Little House on the set, no, it's too far, and you would have heard glug glug glug. You'd heard nothing. So yeah, the real bell is in Walnut Grove, and that's true. His boots would not still be here, but the bell is still in Walnut Grove over 100 years later. So that's cool. I guess it was a good $3 investment. The bell's still there. See? The Glittering Cloud, chapter 25. Oh, that's not good. So we've been hearing about this grasshopper weather for chapters and chapters. Hi, Pamela. Okay. So right away when they show up, the guy who's selling them the house said that he had to get out of town. You're leaving? Yeah. And oh, Mr. Hansen's leaving. Yeah, bye. And they were like, oh, I don't know why he didn't plant very much wheat, and why is he leaving his crop and everything, just bailing on this house? And when he left, he said, grasshopper weather. And he said, I don't know what grasshopper weather is. And everyone keeps telling him it's grasshopper weather. And they go, why is the creek so high? It's a really wet winter. And why is the weather so weird? We did a really late snow. It didn't snow. And then it was abnormally wet. And now it's like really hot. And the weather is like off. It's like too hot and too cold. And this part's too long. And this part of the phase of the summer is too short. And they couldn't figure out what's with the weather. And every time they asked, people would say, because it's grasshopper weather. And they said, it must be some Norwegian expression. Because they didn't bother, go further with that. Go, what does that mean? They would have told them it means a plague of locusts is coming to eat your crops. That's what it meant. Glittering cloud. Now the wheat was almost ready to cut. Every day, Paul looked at it. Every night, he talked about it. He's been talking about it a lot. And showed Laura some long, stiff wheat heads. The plump grains were getting harder in their little husks. Pa said the weather was perfect for ripening wheat. But this is kind of sad. If this keeps up, he said, we'll start harvesting next week. Maybe he should do that right now. A little early? I don't know. The weather was very hot. The thin, high sky was too hot to look at. Air rose up in waves from the whole prairie, as it does from a hot stove. In the schoolhouse, the children panted like lizards, and their sticky pine juice dripped down the board walls. You ever been in a place where it's so hot, like the sap came out of the boards in the building? It's hot. Saturday morning, Laura went walking with Pa to look at the wheat. It was almost as tall as Pa. He lifted her onto his shoulder so that she could see over the heavy bending tops. The field was greeny gold. At the dinner table, Pa told Ma about it. He had never seen such a crop. There were 40 bushels to the acre, and wheat was $1 a bushel. Okay, that's a lot of money. They were rich now. This was a wonderful country. Now they could have anything they wanted. Laura listened and thought now Pa would get his new boots. Okay, 40 bushels to the acre, and wheat's $1 a bushel. So that's $40 an acre. I don't know. How many acres did they have? I do not know. Math. But that's a lot, because even $40 is a lot. And then, it's scary. So I don't know. Can you harvest wheat early? See, if he knew about the grasshoppers, he might have gone, ooh, let's harvest it now. Maybe. But no. Very sad. She sat facing the open door and the sunshine streaming through it. Something seemed to dim the sunshine. Uh-oh. Laura rubbed her eyes and looked again. The sunshine really was dim. It grew dimmer until there was no sunshine. I do believe a storm is coming up, said Ma. There must be a cloud over the sun. Oh, they still don't know. They're still not getting it. Oh, it's terrible. Pa got up quickly and went to the door. A storm might hurt the wheat. He looked out. Then he went out. The light was queer. It was not like the change light before a storm. The air did not press down as it did before a storm. The air did not... Laura was frightened. She did not know why. She ran outdoors where Pa stood looking up at the sky. Ma and Mary came out too, and Pa asked, "What do you make of that, Caroline?" A cloud was over the sun. It was not like any cloud they had ever seen before. It was a cloud of something like snowflakes, but they were larger than snowflakes, thin and glittering. Light shone through each flickering particle. My dad grew up on a farm. My father grew up on a farm in Mozart, Saskatchewan. Canadians, Mozart, Saskatchewan. A bunch of Icelandic people. And he grew up on a farm. And yeah, he's like, whole bit. Storms, prairie fires, locusts, tornadoes. They did it all. There was no wind. The grasses were still and the hot air did not stir, but the edge of the cloud came on across the sky faster than wind. The hair stood up on Jack's neck. All at once he made a frightful sound up at that cloud, a growl and a whine. Chewbacca. Plunk! Something hit Laura's head and fell to the ground. She looked down and saw the largest grasshopper she had ever seen. Then huge brown grasshoppers were hitting the ground all around her, hitting her head and her face and her arms. They came thudding down like hail. Ew, disgusting. The cloud was hailing grasshoppers. The cloud was grasshoppers. Their bodies hid the sun and made darkness. Their thin, large wings gleamed and glittered. The rasping whirring of their wings filled the whole air, and they hit the ground and the house with the noise of a hailstorm. Well, she knew her Bible. She should have known about playing a locust. She must have seen this coming. Laura tried to beat them off. Their claws clung to her skin and her dress. They looked at her with their bulging eyes, turning their heads this way and that. I'm a locust. That's creepy. Oh, ew. Mary ran screaming into the house. Well, yes, grasshoppers covered the ground. There was not one bare bit to step on. Laura had to step on grasshoppers, and they squished, squirming and slimy under her feet. Oh, yeah, they were barefoot and had to walk in over the locust. Ew. Ma was slamming the window shut all around the house. Yep. Pa came and stood just inside the front door looking out. Laura and Jack stood close behind him. Grasshoppers beat down from the sky and swarmed thick over the ground. Their long wings were folded, and their strong legs took them hopping everywhere. The air whirred, and the roof went on sounding like a roof in a hailstorm. Then Laura heard another sound, one big sound made of tiny nips and snips and gnawings. "The wheat!" Pa shouted. He dashed out the back door and ran toward the wheat field. It has literally taken him that entire time, the entire time since they arrived, planted the wheat, grew the wheat, to literally the locusts appeared, stared at them. They had to come all the way down, fall, hit him literally get hit in the face by a locust, and then still stand there. And when they finally began to eat the wheat, he went, "Oh, duh, locusts are eating my wheat." Took him all that time. That was a long time. But terrible. Yep. Oh, there's pictures. He dashed out the back door and ran toward the wheat field. The grasshoppers were eating. You could not hear one grasshopper eat unless you listened very carefully while you held him and fed him grass. Millions and millions of grasshoppers were eating now. You could hear the millions of jaws biting and chewing. That's horrifying. And look. Yeah, grasshoppers! Yeah, grasshoppers! They set fires. They're setting fires. Grasshoppers. Oh, also the chickens are helping. That's the chickens are trying to help them. Because, horrible. Pa came running back to the stable. Through the window, Laura saw him hitching Sam and Dave to the wagon. He began pitching old dirty hay from the manure pile into the wagon as fast as he could. Ma ran out, took the other pitchfork, and helped him. Then he drove away to the wheat field, and Ma followed the wagon. Pa drove around the field, throwing out little piles of stuff as he went. Ma stood over one, then a thread of smoke rose from it and spread. Ma lighted pile after pile. Laura watched till a smudge of smoke hid the field and Ma and Pa in the wagon. Grasshoppers were still falling from the sky. The light was still dim because grasshoppers covered the sun. But they were setting little fires because the grasshoppers don't like smoke. You might possibly have done that when you first saw the cloud before they actually landed on top of your wheat. If you had known, like maybe someone had told you they were coming. Grasshopper weather. Ma came back to the house, and in the clothes lean-to, she took off her dress and her petticoats and killed the grasshopper she shook out of them. She had lighted fires all around the wheat field. Perhaps smoke would keep the grasshoppers from eating the wheat. Ma and Mary and Laura were quiet in the shut, smothery house. Oh yeah, they had to shut the windows and it hot, hot. Carrie was so little that she cried even in Ma's arms. She cried herself to sleep. Through the walls came the sound of the grasshoppers eating. The darkness went away. The sun shone again. All over the ground was a crawling, hopping mass of grasshoppers. They were eating all the short, soft grass off the knoll. The tall prairie grasses swayed and bent and fell. "Oh, look," Laura said, low at the window. They were eating the willow tops. The willows. The willow leaves were thin and bare twigs stuck out. Then whole branches were bare and knobby with masses of grasshoppers. "I don't want to look any more," Mary said, and she went away from the window. Laura did not want to look any more either, but she could not stop looking. That's Laura's whole thing. Laura is the great observer. That's why she became an author. Even when it's the end of the world and grasshoppers are eating the wheat, she's like, and she can't stop. She can't stop. The hens were funny. The two hens and their gawky pullets were eating grasshoppers. Pullets, a little tiny chicken. Eating the grasshoppers with all their might. The chickens were trying to save them. They were used to stretching their necks out low and running fast after grasshoppers and not catching them. Every time they stretched out now, they got a grasshopper right then. They were surprised. They kept stretching out their necks and trying to run in all directions at once. "Well, we won't have to buy feed for the hens," said Ma. "There's no great loss without some gain." I can't think. I don't know if I could have come up with it. I'm pretty positive, but I think if the locusts were eating my crops, I might not have gone, "Oh, look, we don't have to feed the chickens." That's, wow. No great loss without saying, "Well, we would have to feed the chickens. Look, the hens have food." I didn't know. Oh, see, people are talking about this. Yep. What do you, cicada. Yep, they're terrible. The green garden rows were wilting down. The potatoes, the carrots, the beets and the beans were being eaten away. The long leaves were eaten off the corn stalks, and the tassels and the ears of young corn in their green husks fell covered with grasshoppers. They ate the corn, so you can't say, "Oh, well, they ate the wheat," but no, they ate the corn too. There was nothing anybody could do about it. Smoke still hit the wheat field. Sometimes Laura saw Pa moving dimly in it. He stirred up the smoldering fires, and thick smoke hit him again. When it was time to go for Spot, oh, yes, the cow. When it was time to go for Spot, Laura put on stockings and shoes and a shawl. Yeah, you need shoes. Spot was standing in the old ford of Plum Creek, shaking her skin and switching her tail. The herd went mournfully lowing beyond the old dugout. Ooh. Laura was sure the cattle could not eat grass so full of grasshoppers. If the grasshoppers ate all the grass, the cattle would starve. Grasshoppers were thick under her petticoats and on her dress and shawl. Blech. She kept striking them off her face and hands. Her shoes and Spot's feet crunched grasshoppers. Blech. Ma came out in a shawl to do the milking. Laura helped her. They could not keep grasshoppers out of the milk. Ew, double ew, okay? Ma had brought a cloth to cover the pail, but they could not keep it covered while they milked into it. Ma skimmed out the grasshoppers with a tin cup. Scooping the bugs out of your milk. Gag. I would be so grossed out. Grasshoppers went into the house with them. Their clothes were full of grasshoppers. Some jumped onto the hot stove where Mary was starting supper. Ma covered the food till they had chased and smashed every grasshopper. She swept them up and shoveled them into the stove. Well, these will make good fuel. Pa came into the house long enough to eat supper while Sam and David were eating theirs. Ma did not ask him what was happening to the wheat. She only smiled and said, "Don't worry, Charles. We've always got along." Boy, Pa's throat rasped, and Ma said, "Have another cup of tea, Charles. It will help get the smoke out of your throat." Now, remember, he's out there with smoke. They're doing the smoke thing that can sometimes freak out the grasshoppers and kill them. But he has no mask. He does not have a oxygen thing. He does not have a face mask. He's just standing there breathing the same smoke that he's putting out there to kill the grasshopper. So it's not good for him. He's going to get really sick. Yuck. When Pa had drunk the tea, he went back out to the wheat field with another load of old hay and manure. Oh, so he's not just burning hay, he's burning manure. Whoa, that's going to smell. In bed, Laura and Mary could still hear the whirring and snipping and chewing. Laura felt claws crawling on her. There were no grasshoppers in the bed, but she could not brush the feeling off her arms and cheeks. In the dark, she saw grasshoppers' bulging eyes and felt their claws crawling until she went to sleep. Ew. Pa was not downstairs next morning. All night he had been working to keep the smoke over the wheat, and he did not come to breakfast. He was still working. The whole prairie was changed. The grasses did not wave. They had fallen into ridges. The rising sun made all the prairie rough with shadows where the tall grasses had sunk against each other. The willow trees were bare. In the plum thickets, only a few plum pits hung to the leafless branches. The nipping, clicking, gnawing sound of grasshoppers eating was still going on. They ate all the fruit, they ate all the vegetables. At noon, Pa came driving the wagon out of the smoke. He put Sam and David into the stable and slowly came to the house. His face was black with smoke, and his eyeballs were red. He hung his hat on the nail behind the door and sat down at the table. "It's no use, Caroline," he said. "Smoke won't stop them. They keep dropping down through it and hopping in from all sides. The wheat is falling now. They're cutting it off like a scythe and eating it, straw and all." He can't even sell the straw. He put his elbows on the table and hid his face with his hands. Laura and Mary sat still. Only Carrie, on her high stool, rattled her spoon and reached her little hand toward the bread. She was too young to understand. "Never mind, Charles," Ma said. "We've been through hard times before." Laura looked down at Pa's patched boots under the table, and her throat swelled and ached. Pa could not have new boots now. Pa's hands came down from his face, and he picked up his knife and fork. His beard smiled, but his eyes would not twinkle. They were dull and dim. "Don't worry, Caroline," he said. "We did all we could, and we'll pull through somehow." Then Laura remembered that the new house was not paid for. Pa had said he would pay for it when he harvested the wheat. It was a quiet meal, and when it was over, Pa lay down on the floor and went to sleep. Ma slipped a pillow under his head and laid her finger on her lips to tell Laura and Mary to be still. They took Carrie into the bedroom and kept her quiet with paper dolls. The only sound was the sound of the grasshoppers eating. Ugh. Day after day. This didn't just go on for a day or two. This just kept going. Day after day, the grasshoppers kept on eating. They ate all the wheat and the oats. They ate every green thing, all the garden, all the prairie grass. "Oh, Pa, what will the rabbits do?" Laura asked, "and the poor birds?" "Look around you, Laura," Pa said. The rabbits had all gone away. The little birds of the grass tops were gone. The birds that were left were eating grasshoppers, and prairie hens ran with outstretched necks, gobbling grasshoppers. When Sunday came, Pa and Laura and Mary walked to Sunday school. The sun shone so bright and hot that Ma said she would stay at home with Carrie, and Pa left Sam and David in the shady stable. Okay, it was so hot that even Ma didn't want to go to church. There had been no rain for so long that Laura walked across Plum Creek on dry stones. The whole prairie was bare and brown. Millions of brown grasshoppers whirred low over it. Not a green thing was in sight anywhere. Blech. All the way, Laura and Mary brushed off grasshoppers. They still walked to church. When they came to the church, brown grasshoppers were thick on their petticoats. They lifted their skirts and brushed them off before they went in. But careful as they were, the grasshoppers had spit tobacco juice on their best Sunday dresses. Oh, yeah, you can get the grasshoppers off, but then you're going to get grasshopper spit. It's disgusting. Nothing would take out the horrid stains. They would have to wear their best dresses with the brown spots on them. Ugh. Many people in town were going back east. People were leaving. They're leaving. They're going, yes, we're gone. There's nothing here. Christy and Cassie had to go. Laura said goodbye to Christy, and Mary said goodbye to Cassie, their best friends. Gone, poof, gone. That's another. Their characters didn't stay on the show that long, but in real life, they were out by chapter 22 here. They were gone because grasshoppers ate everything on their farm. They did not go to school anymore. They must save their shoes for winter, and they could not bear to walk barefooted on grasshoppers. School would be ended soon anyway, and Ma said she would teach them through the winter so they would not be behind their classes when school opened again next spring. Pa worked for Mr. Nelson and earned the use of Mr. Nelson's plow. He began to plow the bare wheat field to make it ready for next year's wheat crop. A brave soul, optimistic, and still borrowing things. So, yeah, it sounds familiar. People have lost everything. Crops are gone. People are having to say goodbye to people. Oh, in school's shut down. It'll open again in a few months. That sounds familiar. No walk again, and they're all stuck in the house. Yep, and there's no wheat. There's no flour in the store. Yep, Little House on the Prairie again. You know, it was all over the news that because Little House on the Prairie, they reran the episodes Plague and Quarantine the other day on some channel, and everybody went nuts and said, Little House on the Prairie predicted the pandemic. It's like, well, no, it's just that there's always a pandemic. We had plague and we had quarantine on Little House. We had typhus. We had anthrax. Life was really rough. And now the Dingles, they're stuck at home and they can't go on Zoom. They can't go on Facebook and talk to their friends. And they can't call Grubhub and have food delivered. So yes, it's quite a bit harder for them. This is like horrifying. There's more grasshoppers. Okay, I'm going to read grasshopper eggs. You're getting 3 today. Bonus. Grasshopper eggs. Because it's continuing the disgusting grasshopper chapter. And we must read about the grasshopper eggs. So does this ever end, the chewing grasshoppers? One day, Laura and Jack wandered down to the creek. Mary liked to sit and read and work sums on the slate, but Laura grew tired of that. Outdoors was so miserable that she did not much like to play either. Plum Creek was almost dry. Only a little water seeped through the pebbly sand. Remember how it was flooding the house at one point? The bare willow did not shade the footbridge now. Under the leafless plum thickets, the water was scummy. The old crab had gone away. Okay, the crab left. It was so horrible that the crab left. That's how bad things were. The dry earth was hot. The sunshine was scorching, and the sky was a brassy color. The whirring grasshoppers sounded like heat. There were no good smells anymore, and those stupid grasshoppers are still there. Then Laura saw a queer thing. All over the knoll, grasshoppers were sitting still with their tails down in the ground. They did not stir, even when Laura poked them. She always pokes things with a stick. She poked one away from the hole in which it was sitting, and with a stick she dug out of the hole a gray thing. It was shaped like a fat worm, but it was not alive. She did not know what it was. Jack sniffed at it and wondered too. Laura started toward the wheat field to ask Pa about it, but Pa was not plowing. Sam and David were standing still with the plow, and Pa was walking on the unplowed ground, looking at it. Then Laura saw him go to the plow and lift it out of the furrow. He went, driving Sam and David toward the stable with the idle plow. Just stopped to plow. Yeah, he saw. Laura knew that only something dreadful would make Pa stop work in the middle of the morning. She went as fast as she could to the stable. Sam and David were in their stalls, and Pa was hanging up their sweaty harness. He came out and did not smile at Laura. She tagged softly after him into the house. Oh, yeah, things have just gone from bad to worse is what's happened. Ma looked up at him and said, Charles, what is the matter now? No, it's not what is the matter. What is the matter now? Because everything that could go wrong has gone wrong, and it has now gotten worse. The grasshoppers are laying their eggs, said Pa. The ground's honeycombed with them. Look at the dooryard, and you'll see the pits where the eggs are buried a couple inches deep, all over the wheat field, everywhere. You can't put your finger down between them. Look here. He took one of those gray things from his pocket and held it on his hand. That's one of them, a pod of grasshopper eggs. I've been cutting them open. There's 35 or 40 eggs in every pod. There's a pod in every hole. 8 or 10 holes to the square foot, all over this whole country. Ew. Ma dropped down a chair and let her hands fall helpless at her sides. We've got no more chance of making a crop next year than we have of flying, said Pa. When those eggs hatch, there won't be a green thing left in this part of the world. Second wave. Ew. Oh, Charles, Ma said, what will we do? Pa slumped down on a bench and said, I don't know. Okay, because Pa's always like, oh, all's well that ends well. Oh, we've been through this before. Hey, don't worry, Caroline, and then I'll get new boots, and it'll be fine. Yes, we've gotten through. Now he's like, I got nothing. I got nothing. It is the grasshoppers came, and now they're laying eggs. It's really terrible. Mary's braid swung over the edge of the ladder hole, and her face looked down between them. She looked anxiously at Laura. Laura looked up at her. Then Mary backed down the ladder without a sound. She stood close beside Laura, backed against the wall. Pa straightened up. His dim eyes brightened with a fierce light, not like the twinkle Laura had always seen in them. But I do know this, Caroline, he said. No pesky mess of grasshoppers can beat us. We'll do something. You'll see. We'll get along somehow. Yes, Charles, said Ma. Why not, said Pa. We're healthy. We've got a roof over our heads. We're better off than lots of folks. You get an early dinner, Caroline. I'm going to town. I'll find something to do. Don't you worry. There you go. What? He was down. Well, I was like, 2 minutes? 2 minutes. He was like, I'm dead. I got nothing. We're done. Okay? I'm getting a job. Like that. That's Charles. That's Charles for you. That's what to do. While he was gone to town, Ma and Mary and Laura planned a fine supper for him. Ma scalded a pan of sour milk and made pretty white balls of cottage cheese. Ooh, we can all make cottage cheese at home. I have to try that. Mary and Laura sliced cold boiled potatoes, and Ma made a sauce for them. There were bread and butter and milk besides. I would say there's some probably rather fat chickens in the yard about now, too. Then they washed and combed their hair. They put on their best dresses and their hair ribbons. They put Carrie's white dress on her and brushed her hair and tied the strings of Indian beads around her neck. They were all waiting when Pa came up the grasshopper knoll. That was a merry supper. When they had eaten every bit of it, Pa pushed back his plate and said, Well, Caroline. Yes, Charles, Ma said. Here's the way out, said Pa. I'm going east tomorrow morning. Oh, Charles, no, Ma cried out. It's all right, Laura, Pa said. He meant, don't cry, and Laura did not cry. It's harvest time back there, Pa told them. The grasshoppers went only about 100 miles east of here. Beyond that, there's crops. It's the only chance to get a job, and all the men in the West are heading for those jobs. I've got to get there quick. If you think it's for the best, Ma said, the girls and I can get along, but Charles, it will be such a long walk for you. Shucks, what's a couple of 100 miles? And the bad boots, yeah. But he glanced at his old patch boots. Laura knew he was wondering if they would last to walk that far. A couple 100 miles don't amount to anything, he said. Then he took his fiddle out of the box. He played for a long time in the twilight, while Laura and Mary sat close to him, Ma rocked Carrie nearby. He played Dixieland, and we'll rally round the flag, boys. He played All the Blue Bonnets Are Over the Border, and Oh, Susanna, don't you cry for me. I'm going to California with my washband on my knee. He played The Campbells Are Coming, hurrah, hurrah, hurrah. He played Life, Let Us Cherish. I don't know that one. And he put away the fiddle. He must go to bed early to get an early start in the morning. Take good care of the old fiddle, Caroline, he said. It puts heart into a man. After breakfast at dawn, Pa kissed them all and went away. His extra shirt and pair of socks were rolled in his jumper and slung on his shoulder. Just before he crossed Plum Creek, he looked back and waved. Then he went on, all the way out of sight, without turning again. Jack stood pressed close against Laura. They all stood still for a moment after Pa was gone. Then Ma said cheerfully, We have to take care of everything now, girls. Mary and Laura, you hurry with the cow to meet the herd. She went briskly into the house with Carrie, while Laura and Mary ran to let Spot out of the stable and drive her toward the creek. No prairie grass was left, and the hungry cattle could only wander along the creek banks, eating willow sprouts and plum brush and a little dead dry grass left from summer. Well, that was depressing. Well, things sure were worse in the 1800s for the Ingalls than even for us now, because it's the 1800s. And the 1800s were kind of horrible. What are you going to do? Locusts. We still have locusts. There's a plague of locusts now, isn't there? Is it in Africa? I believe there's a plague of locusts as I speak. And that does happen. My dad grew up on a farm, and he said, yeah, it's completely horrible. He said, what do you do? So, yeah, and now Pa said, well, I can get a job. But He is going to go walk 100 miles. You think maybe take like a horse? You could take a horse, like Brad, could be a little quicker. Wait, other guys are going. Maybe somebody else is going with a wagon or a buggy. Could, you know, I don't know. But he's going to walk in the beat-up boots. And he's going to kind of be a migrant farm laborer and go help harvest. Although helping harvest, there was a lot of stuff about people coming in and threshing wheat and getting paid. So apparently it pays reasonably well. But that's what he literally is going to have to do, is schlep all the way back over there and go harvest somebody else's crops and come home and hope it's enough. Still not going to pay for the house. So things are dim. Things are dim again. But you kind of see why, in real life, the eagles did not stay in Plum Creek, Walnut Grove, very long. You know, in the show, we were at Walnut Grove for years. And then we went to Winoka, which doesn't really exist. And then we had to come back, and we were there forever. And in real life, they were like, guys, again, things were not going well. So very sad for the Ingalls this week. Then we will be reading again tomorrow at 1:30. Apparently it will rain. Rain is good. That's an improvement, I guess. Are there pages? There is a page. Look, some weirdo. I don't know. How did this even happen? Somebody tore a page out of my book. I have no idea how that happened. This book is old. I don't know. But luckily, I do have a Kindle, so I can read that chapter electronically if necessary. And then the letter, because he is able... No phones. Paul has no cell phone, but he does write, so that's good. So things apparently do get slightly better for the Ingalls soon. I mean, eventually the Grasshoppers do their thing and they go. Eventually. But there you go. And there, and they said, well... What did they do? Even when it was all just shot, they made a nice dinner. They got dressed up, and they, made the best of it. I tell you, that's what, I colored my hair. I'm doing my nails. I got bonnets. I get dressed up. I put on makeup. Easter, we did. Me and my husband Bob, I made a fancy Easter dinner. Had asparagus and everything. And we did. We even videotaped some of it. And we did. I made fancy Easter dinner. And we had chocolate bunnies, and it was kind of awesome. I mean, we couldn't go anywhere, but we had Easter dinner. We got all dressed up. We've been doing this. We're like, let's dress for dinner, and we'll get completely dressed up and eat dinner. So, I don't know, a little of that Ingalls spirit, a little something. So yeah, my nails beautiful. Actually, my nails, they need work. They're doing pretty good. So they're getting shorter because the acrylics are going to go bye-bye, the last of the acrylics. This one's kind of messed up. This one's kind of messed up, but I fixed them and painted them. So there will probably, in the next day or so, need a little work on these. But I'll keep them good. And I am liking this particular box of hair color. And it looks like it's all, it's all shiny and thick. And yeah, and it's a nice color. It's a lovely shade. I gotta write down what color this was. Make a note of that and order another box, because this is definitely the way to go. So yeah, the poor Ingalls. And yet, there's 5 more books, so they make it somehow. Murder hornets. Let's hope the murder hornets do not arrive. And we'll all make it through somehow. Like Charles and Caroline, we will make it out of this madness. We will. So wash your hands. Ma would tell you to wash your hands. I don't know. Use some of that good Last soap. Get your bonnets. Get some rest. Take a nap. Eat something. Call your friends. Check in on each other. And I'll see you tomorrow. And don't forget, Saturday, May 9th, I'll be in that part of the living room. And a lot of you got the newsletter. Did you get the newsletter? Did everybody get the newsletter? Yeah, I know you're getting the newsletter. I saw your request for the newsletter. And Bob put in as many of you as he could. But then, he sent out the newsletter. And requests were still coming. So you'll get the next one. Tomorrow at 1:30.